I was horse cart ride practically all the time. But once I got it, and once I knew the fella and he was indelibly stamped, then I could leave him alone and go get him when I wanted him.
The night Dan Blocker died, something broke that never fully came back. For years on Bonanza, he felt larger than life, a man audiences trusted without thinking twice. Then, at 43, he was gone, suddenly, leaving behind a family that had to live with a version of him the public never truly knew. Decades later, his son Dirk Blocker has finally spoken about what that loss really looked like from the inside. And it's not the story people think they know. So what did Dirk Blocker reveal? And why does it change the way this story is remembered? Join us as we uncover the truth behind Dan Blocker. The man the world never fully knew. Most people who know the name Dan Blocker know it through one role: the enormous, soft-hearted Hoss Cartwright on Bonanza, the Nevada rancher who would rather talk a man out of a fight than throw a punch, whose nickname meant big and friendly in the language of the frontier. It is one of the most complete fusions of actor and character in the history of American television. And it happened because the man playing Hoss was drawing from something genuine in himself, rather than performing a personality that had been constructed for him by the writers. Dan Blocker was born in DeKalb, Texas, in Bowie County, and he was physically extraordinary from the very beginning of his life. He weighed nearly 14 pounds at birth, a size that his hometown of DeKalb talked about for years afterward. He played football at Hardin-Simmons University before transferring to Sul-Ross State Teachers College in Alpine, Texas, where he was a star on the field, graduated with a degree in speech and drama in 1950, and met the woman he was going to marry, Dolphia Parker, his college sweetheart. He worked as a bouncer in a bar and as a rodeo performer while he was a student, which are two pieces of his biography that do not typically appear in the promotional materials for a family-friendly television western, but which tells a great deal about the specific combination of physical presence and human warmth that made him so believable in the role he eventually landed. He was drafted into the United States Army and served in Korea as a first sergeant, earning a Purple Heart for his service before coming home and enrolling to pursue a master's degree in dramatic arts. He taught school in Texas for several years, working as an English teacher while pursuing acting on the side. When he finally arrived in Los Angeles in 1958, he had planned to do postgraduate work at UCLA, but he began getting acting roles almost immediately. His first significant appearance was in a Three Stooges short, which is not the most dignified beginning for a career that would eventually make him one of the most recognizable faces on American television, but it got him in front of cameras and in front of producers who were beginning to notice the specific quality he brought to a scene. What he brought was the ability to make an enormous physical presence feel completely non-threatening, which is a much rarer quality than it sounds. He was 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighed over 300 pounds, and yet the dominant impression he left on everyone who met him was of gentleness. That specific combination was exactly what the producers of Bonanza needed when they were building the character of Hoss Cartwright. And the philosophy he brought to Hoss was not something the writers gave him. It came from a quote he had carried for years before anyone put him in front of a camera. "We shall pass this way on earth but once. If there is any kindness we can show or good act we can do, let us do it now, for we will never pass this way again." The man was playing himself. And that is the deepest inside secret of the character, that Hoss Cartwright was not a performance, but a reflection. But how did his personality build a career so much bigger than he ever dreamed of? The career that was bigger than most people remember. The image most people carry of Dan Blocker is entirely attached to the Ponderosa Ranch and the character of Hoss. which is understandable given how completely that role defined his public identity for more than a decade. But the career that ran alongside Bonanza was more varied and more surprising than most people who loved the show ever realized. In 1963, Dan Blocker starred alongside Frank Sinatra in the comedy Come Blow Your Horn, which demonstrated a range of comedic timing that the long-running Western format never fully had room to showcase. He worked with Frank again in 1968 in the film Lady in Cement, playing a menacing tough guy, a performance so far removed from the gentle hoss that it revealed something about his capabilities that Bonanza was never going to ask for. These were not vanity projects or celebrity cameos. These were genuine film roles taken on by a man who was interested in testing himself beyond the limits of what a television audience expected of him. Stanley Kubrick attempted to cast Blocker in Dr. Strangelove after Peter Sellers elected not to play Major T.J. Kong in addition to his other multiple roles in the film. The attempt failed because Blocker's agent rejected the script on his behalf. That was a near miss with one of the most significant films of the 20th century. Dan Blocker was Kubrick's choice to replace Peter Sellers in Dr. Strangelove. The role eventually went to Slim Pickens, and the film became a landmark. How Blocker's version of that performance might have landed is one of the more tantalizing what-ifs in the history of American cinema. Also in 1963, Blocker co-founded a chain of Bonanza Steakhouse restaurants and received partial ownership in exchange for serving in character as Hoss as their commercial spokesman and making personal appearances at franchise locations. This is the kind of business arrangement that feels very much of its era, and it shows the specific commercial power that the Hoss Cartwright character had developed by the early 60s. The name and the face were recognizable enough that attaching them to a restaurant chain was considered a sound investment. His political life was equally interesting and equally underreported. Blocker was among Hollywood celebrities who supported Pat Brown's re-election as governor of California in 1966 against Ronald Reagan. In 1968, he backed Senator Eugene McCarthy for the Democratic presidential nomination before supporting eventual nominee Hubert Humphrey. In an industry where political opinions were frequently softened or hidden to protect commercial relationships, Blocker's willingness to attach his name to progressive political causes reflects the same directness that made him beloved by the Bonanza cast and crew. He was a man who said what he thought and did what he believed. Off-screen, he remained profoundly connected to the people around him. He served as best man at Michael Landon's wedding. That friendship was not a production company talking point. It was real, and it extended into the parts of their lives that had nothing to do with the Ponderosa. He was also, by every account from everyone who spent time with him, genuinely uninterested in the fame the show produced. He found celebrity uncomfortable rather than gratifying. He was reportedly troubled by fans stopping him on the street and telling him how much they loved him. And he once said that if people did not have anything more pressing to concern themselves with than Hoss Cartwright, then what hope was there for the world? Unfortunately, he didn't live very long, and the cause of his death was quite tragic. What happened to him? The death that broke everything. On May 13, 1972, Dan Blocker was 43 years old and had just come through gallbladder surgery. The procedure had gone as well as anyone expected, and there was no reason for anyone around him to anticipate what came next. He died of a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot that travels to the lungs, a complication that can follow surgery and that arrives without much warning. He was gone before the 14th season of Bonanza had begun filming. The shock to the cast and crew was immediate and complete. Lorne Greene told TV Guide afterward, "After Dan's death, I didn't see how the show could continue. I said to my wife, 'That's it. It's finished.' I know Michael Landon felt the same way. Both men were right. Bonanza produced one more season without Hoss, and it was, by the measurement of almost everyone who tracked these things, the least popular and least watched season in the entire run of the show. The network canceled it in January 1973, and the show that had been one of the most watched programs in American television history quietly came to an end because the man at its emotional center was gone. The writers of Bonanza made the unusual decision to reference Hoss's death within the show's storyline during that final season, which was considered at the time to be the first instance in American television history of a show directly addressing the real-life death of one of its characters in the narrative. Years later, in the sequel series Bonanza: The Next Generation, one character offered that Hoss had drowned trying to save another person's life, a fictional death that aligned perfectly with everything the character had always been. Michael Landon's tribute to his friend was the most personal. He said publicly that whenever he needed to cry for a scene in any project after 1972, he would think of Dan Blocker's death. That is a man telling you how much the loss cost him. Dan Blocker was buried in a family plot in Woodman Cemetery in DeKalb, Texas, the same town he had come from. He died 43 years old, with 4 children at home, a career that was still expanding, and a friendship with the men he had worked beside for 13 years that none of them had any reason to believe was about to end. How did his family take the news of his death? And how are they faring? The children he left behind. Dan Blocker and Dolphia Parker married in 1952 and had 4 children, all of whose names begin with D: Dirk, David, and twin daughters, Deborah Lee and Dana Lynn. All 4 of them were children when their father died, and all 4 of them have spent the decades since navigating the particular experience of carrying the name and the legacy of a man most of the world only knows through a television character. David Blocker became a film producer and won an Emmy in 1998 for producing Don King. Only in America, which is a significant professional achievement that demonstrates a genuine creative inheritance from the father, who taught drama and understood storytelling from the inside out. Deborah Lee became an artist and has kept her personal life largely private. Dana Lynn is the most private of all 4 children and has maintained almost complete separation from public attention throughout her adult life. And then there is Dirk. Dennis Dirk Blocker was born on July 31st, 1957, and was 14 years old when his father died. 14 is old enough to understand the full weight of what has happened, to carry the memory of the man clearly, and to feel the specific grief of a loss that comes before you have had the full amount of time with someone that you were expecting. Dirk has described the loss as overwhelming, which is the word of someone who felt its full impact immediately and felt it for a long time afterward. What makes Dirk's story remarkable is the specific relationship between his grief and his career. He became an actor directly because of the time he spent on his father's set, absorbed by the process of watching him work. He said in a 2013 interview with Jeff Pearlman, "I suppose I was bitten by the acting bug at an early age while going to work with my dad. His schedule was such that this was one of the only ways to spend a lot of time with him. As a result, I would watch as he and his cohorts would be chatting amiably about current events one minute, and then watch them transform themselves into someone else when called to the set. A kind of learning through osmosis. That, and that he enjoyed his work so much, likely carried over for me. So the career that brought him closest to his father's memory was also the career that his father's death left him to pursue entirely alone, without the person whose example had made it feel worth pursuing in the first place. Now, to the most important question, what did Dirk reveal about his father? what Dirk finally admitted about growing up in that shadow. The most direct and revealing thing Dirk has said about growing up as Dan Blocker's son came in the 2013 interview. "Growing up with a famous father stripped me of any desire for fame. My pop could hardly go anywhere without being mobbed by fans. So, the life of a character actor or supporting player has always appealed to me." That statement contains the full complexity of what it means to love and admire a famous father, while also having watched that fame take something away from the ordinary life you wanted to share with him. Dirk watched his father be unable to go anywhere without being recognized, without being approached, without being held at a slight remove from the world by the specific experience of being someone that millions of people felt they knew personally. And the lesson he took from that observation was not that fame was something to pursue, but something to specifically avoid. He built an entire career around staying in the background. A career as a character actor and supporting player that gave him the craft and the human connection that drew him to acting in the first place, without the version of public exposure that had made his father's daily life something other than fully his own. His career reflects exactly that philosophy. His first major role came in the late 1970s as pilot Jerry Bragg on the World War II series Ba Ba Black Sheep. He appeared in Little House on the Prairie, MASH, The X-Files, Walker, Texas Ranger, Beverly Hills 90210, and Murder, She Wrote, accumulating the kind of resume that belongs to someone who is very good at their job and very deliberate about staying in the space just below the reach of the fame that changes everything. He even appeared in Bonanza, The Return as a reporter named Fenster, which is perhaps the most specific example of how completely he understood the difference between honoring his father's legacy and attempting to inhabit it. Then came Brooklyn Nine-Nine. From 2013 to 2021, Dirk Blocker played Detective Hitchcock on the NBC comedy series, a role that gave him the sustained audience recognition his entire career had been carefully structured to avoid. Fans who discovered who his father was frequently commented on how much Dirk looked and sounded like Dan Blocker. The physical resemblance is genuinely striking. The same build, the same face, the same quality of presence that makes you feel like you are not watching someone perform, but watching someone simply exist in front of a camera. He has also published a children's book titled Master and the Little Monk, which reflects the same interest in storytelling and human connection that drew him to acting in the first place, and that he almost certainly absorbed from a man who chose to play Hoss Cartwright, using a quote about kindness and the passage of time. What Dirk has finally been willing to say, across interviews and reflections that have become more open as he has grown older, is that his relationship to his father's memory is not uncomplicated. He loved his father. He carries his father's influence through every professional choice he has ever made. And the specific way Dan Blocker's fame operated, the inability to move through the world as a private person, the fans who treated him as a possession rather than a human being, the sense that the man and the character had become inseparable to everyone outside the family, is exactly what Dirk has been running from his entire career, even while running directly toward the work that brought him as close to his father as anything could. The confession at the heart of his story is this: growing up with Dan Blocker, as his father taught him that fame and happiness are not the same thing. That the most watched man on American television was a man who found celebrity uncomfortable, and that the best possible tribute he could pay to that inheritance was to become an actor who cared deeply about the work and almost not at all about the recognition. That is not a revelation that arrived in a single interview. It is the story of a career and a life built in deliberate response to a father who had more of both than he ever really wanted. Do you think Dirk Blocker's decision to stay in the background as a character actor, rather than pursuing the kind of stardom his father had, was the right choice? Or do you think he could have carried a leading role at the same level his father did? And out of everything Dan Blocker achieved in his 43 years, which part of his story do you think deserves to be better known than it currently is? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.